All right, welcome back to another installment of the Wide Ride Podcast. I'm Miami Hurricanes beat writer Manny Navarro of The Athletic. It's Wednesday, little after 10 a.m., December 7th. We've been 48 hours into the transfer portal window, actually more than 48 hours. And so far at the University of Miami, we've seen 14 players enter their name. Most of them, I would say, are guys that weren't necessarily heavy rotation players. The one big name is Daryl Jackson, who was a 12-game starter for the Hurricanes at defensive tackle, reportedly entering the portal. He wants to go back home. I think his mother is ill. And he's from the Quincy area of Florida, which means he'll be likely going to Florida State, where his former high school coach is there on staff as one of the people off the field, not in a coaching capacity. But either way, that was really the big loss for Miami so far. Um, there could potentially be more here because essentially what we've entered here is free agency in college football. And I wanted to bring on somebody who I know is well tapped into player personnel and talking to a lot of his former 7-on-7 guys and different people in the business. That's our recruiting slash transfer portal insider, Andrew Ferrelli. Andrew, thanks for joining me and coming on to talk about what's been essentially a wild 48 hours, but many more hours of wildness expected here in the weeks ahead. Before you start talking about all this with me, I wanted people to know you've kind of switched affiliations. You were with the South Florida Express for many years, but now you're with a new team. Why don't you tell us about them?
Yeah, so we're starting up Raw 7-on-7 this year. It's me, Jose Duaso, Joel Shapiro, Elijah King. A lot of us have all been involved with former 7-on-7 teams, like the Immortals, South Florida Express, and we decided we wanted to come together and kind of start something new, really build something from the ground up and do something that no one in the 7-on-7 industry has really done yet. Just as far as getting nonprofits involved, local gyms involved, just bringing a lot of people to help these kids on and off the field, and just making it kind of a full encompassing experience for all of them, not just kind of flying these kids out for a tournament here and there, seeing them for a weekend. We wanted to just do a lot to help these players on and off the field, and really build a full organization centered around 7-on-7, but just something that helps these athletes completely on and off the field, whether it's financial literacy, training, everything like that. Just so we've got a lot of things coming. I can't get too much into it, but it should be exciting. We've got a lot of top players coming in. We've got a couple guys that are number one, number two in their position across the country over the next two classes. So we're going to have a very talented team, and it's going to be exciting to see some of the things we're doing, both on the 7-on-7 field and then just in the the community and in the football world as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed covering the 7-on-7 circuit this year. The Athletic allowed me to go along with the South Florida Express out to California, and then of course out to Las Vegas for the national tournament over the summer when it was hot as hell. But still a lot of fun. You and I got to hang out quite a bit at both of those functions and just talk ball and get to know some of these kids. And you're around this so much that you're such a valuable voice. I feel like you're really well plugged in. And I know you spent time talking to guys on the inside. I wanted to just discuss kind of the big picture with Miami because right now they're sitting eighth in the 247 Sports composite rankings in terms of recruiting. This is going to be an elite recruiting class for Miami. There's no question about that. They've got 22 commitments. The two recent additions are three-star guys on the defensive side of the ball. One is a linebacker out of Tyrone, Georgia. Another is a three-star defensive lineman who's huge, 6'5", 290, out of Fairborn, Georgia. He plays at Langston Hughes High School. Can you talk to us first about the two new additions and what you know about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we're seeing Mario prioritize in this class, is just size and speed. He doesn't want, 5'10", 240-pound linebackers that are struggling to cover space. He doesn't want, undersized defensive linemen. He wants a big, fast, physical football team. And both of these guys fit that billing. Obviously with Marcellius Polium, he's 6'3", 220, can cover ground. A linebacker that's a big hitter, sideline to sideline, and kind of fits the bill of all the other linebackers that they've taken so far. Every single one of them has been that 6'2", 6'3", 215, 225 range. Guys that are lengthy, can cover space, and just it's something Miami hasn't had really in that linebacker room outside of Wesley Basaint over the last couple of years. It's been a lot of, shorter, stockier linebackers. And I think that's why Miami struggled so much, whether it's, covering quick running back, slot receivers, stuff like that. They just haven't had that length and that speed at the linebacker position. And I think that's something they're trying to really switch up this year. And then same thing on the defensive line. Miami just wants big guys. And Joshua Horton out of Langston Hughes, he's a kid that's 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds already. Really good first step, physical, and just continues to fit that bill of just wanting to build a big, fast, physical team.
I like super talented guys. I'm not going to sit here and say I won't happily take an elite 5-star or a top 100 ranked player. But Andrew, as long as you and I have been around this game and we've been around it a long time, I do feel like there are times where kids are ranked very high and it gets to their head. I like that he's taking a few 3-star guys that are hungry, that don't necessarily get the respect, but have the big body, have the speed. Agree or disagree with me that every now and then you need to get a few of those guys.
Oh, definitely. And I think especially when it comes to some of those 3-star guys, if they're putting up insane production, especially against pretty good competition, which both of these players are, I know Joshua Horton has had an incredible year. He's got over 100 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, coming from a big body defensive tackle in the state of Georgia. So I think that size, that speed, and that production, I think it's definitely worth taking a flyer on some of those 3-star guys that have that motivation, that chip on their shoulder, and have the skill set and the size to really be coached up.
The needs on defense are plentiful because the majority of the guys who have entered the portal here, and we've already mentioned Daryl Jackson, but there's been some others on the defensive line who have also decided to enter the transfer portal. Yesterday, Jordan Miller, who's a grad, played a lot here actually as a rotational player. Jordan Miller for the last 4 years, he entered his name into the transfer portal. You've got other guys, Antonio Moultrie, Alan Hay. Alan Hay was a second-year recruit. So the defensive tackle position is sort of taken a hit. And right now, the only D tackle that they have in there is Joshua Horton. Now they've added other guys too. They've got Collins Achimpong, who's a big-bodied 6'7", reminds me probably of Gregory Rousseau with how big his body is. Over 250 something pounds. He's a 4-star out of California, former Michigan guy. But the reality is they need some beef. They need some 300 pounders on that defensive line. What are you hearing on that front? Because they've lost some key guys there.
I think it's an area that they're really going to try to attack in the portal. Try to get some guys that can be immediate impact. There's not too many defensive linemen that are in the portal that they've offered yet. I know Tunmiza Delie from A&M. He was a top 40 recruit. If he wasn't a 5-star, just 2021.
Yeah.
Leaving Texas A&M. He's a big kid, 6'4", 295. I know they've offered him, really want him. But then there's a couple kids that I think they're hoping jump in the portal over these next couple days. Obviously, Shamar Stewart's been a name that's been thrown around for a long time if he were to hit the portal. I think there's some just around South Florida that think he hops in the portal, and Miami could be a very likely landing spot for him. I've heard that Kalijah Cansey, the Pitt defensive lineman, he was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. He's sitting out the bowl game. It seems like he's kind of deciding whether he wants to go to the NFL or hop in the portal. I think if he does decide to jump in the portal, he's someone that played down here at Miami Northwestern High School. He would be a big addition that they could bring in. And then I've also heard Evan Anderson from FAU is someone that's been weighing some portal options and stuff, trying to see if he can get up to that Power 5 level. He's a big kid. He's about 6'4", 340. It'd be a really big body to put in the middle. So we'll see. I know those are kind of 3 or 4 of the main guys that they're hoping jump in the portal over these next few days. And I think if any of them do, Miami would have a pretty good shot at bringing them down and having them make an instant impact in the middle of that defensive line.
What's the best way to describe it? Because you kind of painted a picture of what college football is, right? Guys debating whether or not to enter the portal. People don't realize that's really what this is, that it's a lot of quote unquote NIL agents talking to schools behind the scenes, representatives, because the players who aren't in the portal, if they happen to have conversations with school leaders, I mean, that's tampering. So you can get yourself in big trouble for that. So really what a lot of this is players both at Miami and not at Miami having the representatives reach out to schools, reach out to NIL collectives, and figure out what is the best measure for them going forward. And I think, the one thing people don't realize, this is going to be 45 days of this, because I know there's a lot of fans who are like, man, why hasn't Miami gotten anybody yet? I'm like, you do realize that there are a lot of players in college football who want to get paid. It's not just the guys who came in first, it's the guys who are good that are deciding what their value is. And that's a door that's gonna really swing both ways here. Miami could end up losing some really good players who decide, I want to go somewhere else, and Miami decides, we don't really think you're worth that, and then vice versa. Where you mentioned a guy like Kalijah Cansey, who's an elite defensive player from here in South Florida. He's got to decide, well, what are my pro prospects? Am I going to get drafted in the first or second round, or do I go get paid $1 million to play another year of college football? And how does that help me? Those are all decisions that are not easy to make, and the portal just essentially will open.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you said, we're going to see it both ways. I mean, there's every single one of these kids has agents now that are, calling around to schools and different people involved. What can I get from here? What can I get from here? Just basically shopping these players around, seeing what the best situation for them is. And it's happening on Miami's end too. There's a couple players that have been pretty good for that have they haven't entered the portal yet, but they're kind of in those discussions with, hey, talking to Miami, we want this much to stay. Can we get this much? And if Miami says no, they're going to hop in the portal. One of the big names that I've heard is Tyler Van Dyke. There's been reports that he's definitely staying. But from what I've heard, there's still some discussions there regarding NIL opportunities and stuff like that. Miami is looking in the portal. There's a lot of top quarterbacks that have entered the portal. I think if there's one in there that they like better, that fits their system better, I don't think they would hesitate to pull the trigger on one of them, bring them in, and tell Van Dyke he can walk. So we'll see what happens over these next couple weeks. But I think there's been a lot of guys moving into the portal over the last 2 days, and I don't expect that to stop over the next maybe week or two before it maybe slows down a little bit.
Yeah, Miami's got basically 3 scholarship quarterbacks right now, because Peyton Matoka is expected to go. I know from talking to Tyler's reps for the past month leading up to the end of the season, him dealing with all of the injuries that he dealt with his shoulder and so forth, that if given the chance, given the opportunity, he wants to come back to Miami and be the quarterback here. I think the whole point is, he's an NFL guy. I think he wants to have some good players around him. He wants to make sure he's going to be protected. He's not going to be taking big hits. He wants to make sure Miami goes out and gets some good offensive linemen. He wants to make sure that he's got some receivers to throw the football to. But these are all decisions now that people have to think about when it comes to college football. It has become essentially free agency. And I can't blame Tyler for wanting to go to the best situation. If he wants to play in the NFL, he wants assurances that the players around him are going to be good and can help him get there. And so, in the event that Tyler were to leave, because of whatever the situation ends up being, who do you think is Miami's starting quarterback next year? Because I'm of the belief that he will be, that Miami will essentially fix these problems. There will be some receivers coming in. There will be some offensive linemen, and we'll talk about those guys in a second. But in the event Tyler Van Dyke is not here, who is Miami's starting quarterback in 2023 in your mind?
That's tough. If he were to leave, I honestly don't think it would be Jake Garcia. I think they would go to the portal. I know Michael Pratt's been a hot name in the well, I don't think he's officially entered the portal, but he's been a hot name around college football. The Tulane quarterback, he's put up really big numbers. He's from down here, from Boca. I think he'd be someone they'd be interested in bringing in if he were to enter the portal. And then obviously Drake May's name has been, all over the media. Is he going to enter the portal? It sounds like he is. I don't blame him. UNC, from what I've heard, just isn't doing a whole lot on the NIL front, which is kind of surprising me. I think that's why you've seen a lot of their top players go to the portal. And you've seen Mac Brown kind of complain about, what's been going on, just because it doesn't seem like they're really competing on that side of things. If Drake May does go into the portal, I've heard Miami would put out a very competitive NIL offer for him. So we'll see what happens there. I think those would probably be their two biggest targets if both of them were to hit the portal. Another name I've heard thrown around is Jeff Sims as well, the Georgia Tech quarterback, who's in the portal. So I think if things between Miami and Van Dyke don't get smoothed out, and then he does end up leaving, I think Michael Pratt, Drake May, and Jeff Sims would have to be their top three targets.
I do think, though, all things considered, I do think Mario Cristobal likes Tyler Van Dyke. He thinks he's a winner, and I think he would prefer to have him be his quarterback. But I was called probably right after Jaden Rashada decommitted from Miami and was told, look, we need to get the best players we can to fix this thing. And we love Tyler, but essentially, if he decides he wants to go someplace else, they will. But again, this is all such a very fluid situation, Andrew, because like you said, right now what's happening is agents are calling schools to find out what is their players' value. What can they get from that particular collective? Now, I will say, and you mentioned how North Carolina, for instance, and Drake May, by the way, I got to know Drake May's high school coach pretty well. I should probably give him a phone call and find out what's happening here. But you know, I think that what's essentially happening here is a feeling out process that may not even end in the 45-day window here. It's going to continue obviously after spring football. And I think that's something fans probably need to get through their head is um, depending on who schools lose through recruiting, right? Like right now, everybody has these classes formed. But let's say there's defections, guys who flip on signing day. That's going to create needs at other positions. And if certain
Yep.
guys are not available in the transfer portal, you could see these rosters flipping even at the end of spring football in that window in the springtime, that 15-day window. So as much as I want fans to feel comfortable with what's going on and to understand, hey, this is a fluid situation, I don't think they really grasp what that means.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially with signing day coming up and the early signing day period coming up in about 2 weeks. I think once that goes by, you could see kind of like a whole new wave of the portal, starting up again, between schools looking to fill needs on, kids that they may have missed out on or kids leaving because they see that there's, a 4 or 5 star coming in at their position that's likely going to move right over them. So it's definitely gonna continue on. And like you said, even after spring football, that window opens up again for another 15 days. And that's going to be a lot of movement as well from kids that have seen their spot get lost in spring or just aren't happy with the way spring's going. um, Teams looking for spots after to fill spots after spring that they see some weaknesses at. So it's definitely going to be something that continues to move. You're going to see these rosters continue to flip. Do I think there's probably some regulations that come before next year's window? Probably, because this is just
Out of control.
insane. Yeah, completely. There's just no rules, completely out of control. It's insane. I think there's probably some rules and regulations that come in before next year's window opens. But yeah, for the meantime, I mean, it's kids are going to keep just jumping in, jumping out over the next few months.
All right. Running back, Jalen Knighton decided to put his name into the transfer portal. Jalen, led Miami in rushing 2 seasons ago, in his second year in college. Last year, this past season, dealt with some fumbleitis issues. He and Thad Franklin both leaving, which means Miami's down to 3 scholarship running backs: Don Chaney Jr., who's been injured for the most part the last 2 years, and then Henry Parrish, who led the team in rushing, and then of course Trevante Citizen, who had a pretty serious knee injury at the start of camp. Um, Mark Fletcher is a huge target for Miami, but I think it's a Miami Florida battle here down the stretch. I went out to American Heritage, Chaminade, St. Thomas Aquinas. I hit a bunch of schools here in the past 2 weeks as the playoffs were kind of going on, just to talk to guys to get a real gauge. I think Miami's doing a much better job recruiting American heritage than they had before. I heard some stories about a former coach who I won't name, who literally went out there around the time that Brian Burns was there and asked, okay, which one is Brian Burns? So that tells you kind of the way Miami recruited. And you'd think with some of the guys that they've had on staff here that they would have done a better job. But I think they're doing a better job now, at least according to the coaches there at Heritage. Um, let's talk about Mark Fletcher for a second in the running back position. What is Miami doing there? They've only got three. They probably need to get two guys, so they're kind of have the right kind of depth, considering the injuries that happen in college football today.
Definitely. I mean, I know they love Trevante Citizen. They think he's going to be a star. Same thing with Cheney. Hopefully, if the two of them come back healthy, I think that's a very, very solid 1-2 punch there. As well as Parrish, who was very productive this year. So they like those three guys, but obviously, as we saw this year, you need a lot more depth and that running back room with in college football. Um, Mark Fletcher and Chris Johnson continue to be their top two targets when it comes to that running back room. I think they've done a really good job recruiting Fletcher. They've stayed on him from the start. Even when he was committed to Ohio State, they didn't back off at all. They were continually on him. Talked to some people at Miami and in Fletcher's camp. Seems like he likes Miami. His dad likes Miami. The biggest hurdle there is honestly he's just not a huge fan of the lack of atmosphere at some of the UM games and at some just the lack of the kind of like the college town vibe.
Yeah.
He's that's the one thing that has him on the fence. He really does enjoy that college atmosphere and everything at UF. And that's one of the things that's holding it up. But I think in the end, Miami wins out there. They've been on him for a long time. I know, like I said, his dad's a big fan. They've got him in their corner. I think that's someone they end up sealing the deal with when push comes to shove over these next 2 weeks.
How about as far as the transfer portal is concerned? There's some guys that have entered their name in there. There are some guys who have yet to enter their name in there. A lot of South Florida running backs leave this area and go to college. If you had to tap somebody as a potential target to be maybe that fifth running back or a guy who comes in and adds more depth to this roster, who would it be?
I mean, I don't think there's anyone in the portal yet that they've really loved at running back. I know they were hoping Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss would hop in the portal. Kevin Smith had previous relationships with him from being there. He ended up looks like signing to stay at Ole Miss, and then C.J. Donaldson at West Virginia was another one that I think people were hoping would hop in the portal. He was having a great freshman year before he had kind of a freak neck back injury. Seems to be fine now, but he was looking really good as a freshman, also from down here at Gulliver. Um, but as far as the portal goes, I don't think unless one of those two were to make a move, I don't think they're looking too heavily at running back. I think if they can bring in Chris Johnson and Mark Fletcher, I think they'll be pretty happy with the way the running back room stands.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Johnson. He's being pursued by some SEC schools. And we got to see what happens with the staff, who actually stays on, and what staff changes. We'll get to that in a minute. Receivers obviously a huge need for Miami. You had Romello Brinson throw his name into the portal yesterday. That's not surprising. I saw Romello complaining about not getting enough playing time in the last game. He wanted to run out on the field, and they had to yank him back in. Keyshawn Smith is another one. Didn't really play down the stretch. He entered his name in the portal. So Miami's down to 7 scholarship guys right now: Frank Ladson, Xavier Restrepo, Michael Redding, Bashard Smith, Jacoby George, Colby Young, and Isaiah Horton. And they've got 2 commitments: Nathaniel Joseph and Robbie Washington. But they have a lot of tentacles out there, including in the transfer portal for a kid named Andrew Armstrong from Texas A&M Commerce, big receiver, 6'5", 200-pound type guy. Seems to me that the priority here is getting somebody who can make plays downfield that has a big body. What are you hearing on the receiver front?
Definitely, like I said earlier, size and speed. That's what they want on this team. Andrew Armstrong's the name that he was one of the first guys to put his name in the portal or say he was going in the portal coming from Texas A&M Commerce, even before the portal officially opened. And he's someone that Miami was all over as soon as they were allowed to be. I've heard good things there, hoping they're trying to get him to come down for a visit so they can seal the deal. On top of him, I know they really love Dante Thornton. He's another kid, a big 6'5" receiver from Oregon, was a highly rated 4-star recruit. Mario obviously has, a good relationship with him from recruiting him, bringing him into Oregon. He's someone that's high on their board. And then Dante Cephas from Kent State. He's someone they like, but he's being recruited by everyone. He put up some
Right.
insane numbers at Kent State last year. So I think that one may be a little bit of a long shot. And then JoJo Earl, the Alabama wide receiver that just recently entered the portal. So I think right now Andrew Armstrong, Dante Thornton, and JoJo Earl have got to be their top 3 targets at receiver from the portal. All of those guys have good size, good speed. Give them that deep threat, that guy that can go up and make a play. Something that they really haven't had outside of maybe Colby Young last year.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I think that's the number one issue, right? If you're going to be a team that can get, bowl eligible, you need some playmakers on the outside. And it was evident that too many guys were inconsistent. I also think there's been a lot of upheaval in terms of the relationship between the coaches and some of the players there did not necessarily going well. I described the scene that I saw with my own eyes during the game with Romello Brinson, him trying to run out on the field and having to essentially get yanked back on there because he wanted to play so badly. And that's a tough thing to deal with, right? Playing time and roles, etc. And that's something tough to juggle with. And we'll see what Mario ultimately does with his staff and how and what kind of changes he makes and etc. But that's another position I would not be surprised if there are more guys who enter the portal.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think we sit at 14 right now, guys, in the portal. I wouldn't be surprised if that number continues to climb closer to 18 or even 20 over the next week or two.
Yeah. Tight ends, Miami seems pretty set there. Will Mallory's the one guy who left. They've got three commitments: Riley Williams, Jackson Carver, and Reed McKeska. Dominic Mammarelli, Elijah Royal, Khalil Brantley, and Jaleel Skinner are on the roster. I don't think there's going to be a lot of upheaval there. Maybe you have one or two guys go, if anything, because they want playing time, but I don't think that's a position of where things are disrupted at all.
No, it doesn't seem to be a position of concern at all. Like you said, they've obviously got a lot of guys on the roster. They're bringing in three more. They really, really like Riley Williams. He's extremely skilled, big, fast, 6'6", 240 coming out of IMG. Great pass catcher, great route runner. They really love his game. I think if there were to be any shakeup in that room, like you said, it would just be maybe a guy or two towards the bottom leaving for for playing time reasons.
On the offensive line, we've obviously had a few guys leave. Cleveland Reed, Usman Traore, all guys that were here forever, really didn't play much. DJ Scaife, who was a starter at right tackle and right guard for a long time, and then Justice Oluwashun, who unfortunately ran out of eligibility and was injured. He was a guy who was originally in the starting lineup at the start of the season. I would expect, looking at this list, you've got John Campbell, Ja'Kai Clark, Zion Nelson, Jonathan Dennis, Logan Sagapolu, Jalen Rivers, Chris Washington, Lawrence Seymour, Ryan Rodriguez, Michael McLaughlin, Matthew McCoy, and Inez Cooper. Um, I don't know how many of those guys the coaching staff necessarily wants to hold on to because there's some that they really like, I think, being fair, Andrew, and then there's other ones that they are probably saying, hey, big guy, you're not going to play here. Why don't you look somewhere else to go? Is that another area where you would expect some more changes?
Yeah, definitely an area where I would expect some more changes. I think we'll see guys continue to leave there. Um, Obviously, it was one of the weaker positions on the team, and having a coach that was a former offensive lineman, having a well-known offensive line coach, like it's just something that they want to get fixed right away. And I don't think they were happy at all with that position, and it's definitely a room they want to flip. It's one they're going to hit hard in the portal. They feel fairly confident from what I've told about Javian Cohen, the
Yeah.
big time offensive lineman from Alabama.
2 year
Um,
starter for the Crimson Tide at left guard.
was an incredible player for them. Would be a massive addition. Would walk in and start right away. Probably one of the best offensive linemen on this team. They've been in communication with him since that portal window opened. I've heard they're definitely wouldn't call it a done deal or anything like that, but they feel pretty confident there. And then also Jeremiah Byers is one that they've reached out to. He left University of Texas El Paso, had some incredible PFF blocking grades. Is ranked as one of the top offensive linemen in the portal. I know Alonzo Highsmith spoke with him and offered him personally. He's one that they really want. And then also Bram Walden, who was a former top 100 recruit, was at Oregon with Mario Cristobal. I think he's another person that they're looking to bring in. Um, and then obviously they've got a very strong recruiting class when it comes to offensive line, headlined by Francis Mauigoa, the number one tackle in the country. Honestly, he's someone I think walks in, starts 3 years, and is in the NFL. And then they're trying to close with the number three tackle in the country, Samson Akinlola. Seemed like Florida was making a big push there. They didn't seem as confident as they did in the past over the last few weeks. But then over the last couple of days, it seems like they've really picked up a communication with him and are hoping to close that one on early signing day as well. So I think there's both in the recruiting class and in the portal. I think they're really gonna flip just that entire offensive line room.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of upheaval in that room for sure. I think Zion Nelson is a guy they probably want to keep around because when he's healthy and playing well, he can be a starter for you. I think Jalen Rivers is a guy that at times when he's healthy can be a good player for you. But again, it's not a room full of guys that are studs and not definitely not playing the way that Mario wants them to play. In addition to Maui Goa, Miami's got Antonio Tripp. Connor Liu, Tommy Kinsler, and Frankie Tinalau. Tommy Kinsler is going to be playing in the state championship game for Ocala Trinity Catholic this weekend. I'm actually driving up to Tallahassee later today to go watch Chaminade play in the state championship game. And then the following week here in South Florida, you'll have a lot of the local teams: St. Thomas Aquinas, Homestead, Miami Central, Plantation American Heritage. You're going to have a lot of South Florida teams. I mentioned Aquinas already. You're going to have all of them playing in state championship games here in Fort Lauderdale. You're also going to have Cormani McLean coming down with Lakeland to play in that game. So if you want to go out and watch some of these guys, this is as good a time as ever. I know some of you probably don't want to drive to Tallahassee. I do. I want to go check out with some of your former guys with the 7-on-7 Express, South Florida Express team we're doing, and how they're going to 5-star recruits, JoJo Trader and Jermaine Smith. So we'll see how things sort of pan out this weekend. But a lot of talent in South Florida, a lot of talent all over the state, and Mario's trying his best to lock these guys down. We talked a little bit about defensive tackle earlier. We mentioned some of the defensive ends: Jaden Wayne, Collins Anchapong, Ruben Bain, who plays for Miami Central, is obviously a big target for Miami. He recently announced he's going to make his decision on December 16th. I think Louisville and Auburn are essentially out here after some of the coaching changes that were made. So it's kind of a Miami, Florida State battle. What are you hearing on Ruben Bain and any other defensive lineman, edge rusher types that they may end up getting?
I think Miami feels like they're in a good position with Ruben Bain. I think it always seemed like his top three were Miami, Louisville, and Auburn. And obviously, both those other two schools have had some major staff changes going on over the past couple of weeks, which I think really opened the door for Miami to go in and kind of seal the deal there. I think especially the fact that he's moved up his commitment date, given the recent staff changes, the fact that Louisville doesn't even have a head coach yet. I think a lot of that bodes well for Miami going into that decision in a couple of days.
Okay. And any other guys in the transfer portal as far as edge rushers or guys that they hope enter the transfer portal that could help them on the defensive line?
Um, as far as the portal goes on the edge, I know there's been rumors about Pat Payton at FSU. If he were to enter the portal, possibly come back home, that could be someone they'd be interested in. Also, I've heard Eto, the defensive lineman that's committed to Michigan currently. That's
Right. He's
someone
friends with
that they've exactly, yeah. So when they flipped
Collins and Chapon.
Collins,
Mhm.
that's someone that I guess him and Collins have become very close. Miami has really started to push there. It seems like they've made a lot of progress. Wouldn't be surprised if he's someone that ends up down here in Miami's class as well.
We touched on linebacker earlier. The addition of Marcellus Pulliam from Georgia, the 3-star. They've got Raul Aguirre, who's a 4-star out of the same state. Bobby Washington, who I personally think is one of the best players in this recruiting class, 3-star out of Miami Palmetto, and then Caleb Spencer, who is kind of a star type guy, in the defense, a guy who could switch between sort of strong safety DB type, and then the linebacker, outside linebacker spot where he's out in coverage. Those are the guys they kind of have at linebacker. They also are obviously still interested in getting a kid like Stanquan Clark, who may end up pushing back his decision now. Another kid out of Miami Central who had been or is still committed to Louisville, I think. But that's another room that can see major upheaval. I know Avery Huff still hasn't entered his name into the transfer portal. You've got Keontra Smith, you've got Corey Flagg, Chase Smith, and then of course Wesley Basainth, Wayman Steed, and Caleb Johnson are gone because they're out of eligibility. But what are you hearing about the linebacker room?
Yeah, so obviously they want to bring in a big linebacker class. As you just named, they've already got 4 or 5 committed. They're still pushing for Stanquan Clark, especially now that Louisville has lost their head coach. He's someone that's been a big target for them even prior to that happening. He fits that 6'2", 6'3", can run. Outside of Wesley Basainth, I don't think they really love anyone in that linebacker room. So I don't think they would, you'd be surprised to see, like you said, an Avery Huff leave. I've heard rumors about Keontra Smith possibly hopping in the portal as well.
Mhm.
So I think that's a room that you're going to see major changes in. As far as the portal goes, obviously Justin Flo, the former former Oregon linebacker, was a top-rated linebacker coming out of high school a couple years ago. Has a great relationship with Mario. The two of them were very close. From everything I've been told, it seems like that's going to turn into a Miami USC battle. That could be someone that could walk in immediately and make a big difference in this linebacker room just with his size and his speed and his athleticism. It's really something they've lacked outside of Basaint.
Yeah, and Flo, the one thing I will caution everybody with is, he's dealt with a lot of injuries since he's been in college, and even when he was healthy this year, only played in 10 games, didn't play great. It's one of those potentially high risk, high reward. The one thing I would say about Flo that's good is, I think he's been in college now 3 years. So if you take him, it could be just a one and done type deal where if it works out, awesome. If it doesn't, okay, you took a linebacker and he was only a rotational guy for you. But if he can get healthy and somehow fully recover from what he's been dealing with, he could potentially be somebody who helps you out quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a very high reward, possibility with him. Like I said, he was the number one linebacker in the country coming out of high school. He's a guy that's got incredible athleticism, incredible size and speed at that linebacker position. Just kind of hasn't been able to put it all together on the college level. Been dealing with injuries on and off, just a lot of stuff going on. But he's a guy that you hope if you can bring in and he puts it all together for a year, he's definitely has the possibility to be a great talent there in the middle for you.
At cornerback, look, you have some young guys who were a part of this team that didn't play a whole lot. And you've also got some veterans that are essentially leaving. I guess Tyreek Stevens still has to decide if he's going to the NFL or not. I think he's probably going to the NFL to get that money. You have DJ Ivy, who's out of eligibility. Gilbert Frierson, we already mentioned, is somebody who has left the program. You've got Corey Couch, Isaiah Dunson, who left. He's another one that's gone, but Corey Couch is still around. You got Daryl Porter Jr., Malik Curtis, Chris Graves, Jaden Harris, and Kamari Rogers. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scholarship guys at the cornerback position, plus Cormani McLean and Robert Stafford. That said, Miami's still pursuing Damari Brown. His brother, who's a starter at UCF, just entered the transfer portal as well. What do you sort of envision here at the cornerback position?
I think, like you said, Damari is still their top target on the board. They feel pretty good about him. He's committing on early signing day in the next 2 weeks as well. Feel like they've done a very good job, as you said, recruiting American heritage. Ever since Mario got here, they've really made that school a priority. They've been on him for a while. His dad obviously was a former player. So I think they feel good about getting him on board. And then also, along with Cormani McLean, they really like Shadarian Harrison. His teammate at Lakeland's committed to Pitt. He had 2 interceptions this past weekend to help send Lakeland to the state championship game. He's someone that I could see them really start to push for, depending upon how certain dominoes fall in the rest of the class. I think if they really push for him, they could flip him from Pitt. And then they're still pushing hard to flip J.C. Jackson from UF. I know the staff really likes him a lot. So he's someone that they could continue to push for and hopefully flip. Those are definitely their 3 top targets going into signing day. As for the portal, we'll see. I think there's a couple of top ACC DBs that have jumped in the portal. Tony Grimes from USNC and Fentrell Cypress from UVA. I think those have got to be 2 of the guys that they're looking at for sure to try to bring in. I know both of those players have a lot of potential suitors, so I don't know if they'll be able to bring them in. But I know they're definitely going to push there. But I think they seem pretty happy with their recruiting class if they can close with Damari and then hopefully flip either one of JC Jackson or Shadarian Harrison.
And I would think also there's potentially guys that are on the roster now that you've even gotten here the last couple of years that could be leaving out of that cornerback group as well. That's sort of another area
Definitely.
where you may pluck a couple scholarships.
For sure. Obviously, there was the whole issue with Kamari Rogers' dad on Twitter and going back and forth about playing time and everything with him. Wouldn't be surprised if he's someone that ends up jumping in the portal. Chris Graves hasn't played a whole lot. Doesn't seem like there's too big of a connect there with the coaching staff and him. Wouldn't be surprised if he's someone that jumps in there as well. I think you could possibly see, 1 or 2 guys from that room leave. Like I said, we're at 14 now. I wouldn't be surprised if we get up close to 20. So there's definitely another 5, 6 spots on this roster that'll open up over these next couple of weeks.
And then at safety, obviously, some departures there. Al Blades, Avante Williams, Jalen Harrell. Miami's got Antoine Jackson committed right now. I know Deion Sanders is making some phone calls. I've had a couple of coaches tell me that Deion has reached out to players on their teams down here. Conrad Hussey's another name. St. Thomas Aquinas, he's committed to Penn State, but somebody I think that Miami's flirted with flipping and keeping here. And I think and then the guys that you're bringing back again: Brian Balaam, Cam Kitchens, James Williams, Markeith Williams. Those are the four safeties on the roster. But it is a position where, in addition to Antoine Jackson, you probably want to add a veteran if possible.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a position they're looking for in the portal. Haven't heard necessarily a specific name, but I think they definitely want to bring in a safety. As for the recruiting class, they really like Antoine Jackson at safety. And then, as you mentioned, Conrad Hussey, I'd be very, very surprised if he sticks with Pitt at this point. From what I've heard, it seems like it's a Miami FSU battle when it comes to flipping him. And I feel like Miami's in a good position there to land him going into signing day.
Yeah, Conrad Hussey, Penn State actually is where he's been
Oh, I'm
committed,
sorry,
but
Penn
yeah, it's
State.
okay. We got our Pennsylvania schools confused, but it's all good. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens here. We're 2 weeks away from National Signing Day, at least the first 3 day window, and then guys can always push decisions back to February. Andrew, let me ask you this from a player perspective: if you're a high school recruit, and I had a lot of conversations with high school coaches about this, it almost feels like if you don't sign in the early signing period and you push it back to February, you could be in danger of getting screwed over and not having any room because they're going to prioritize transfer portal guys, right?
Oh, definitely. I think the transfer portal's had a massive impact on high school recruiting. I think you're going to see kids try to get on board earlier with a lot of these schools going forward. I think we even saw this year. Just the number of kids that were committing in June, July, August before their senior seasons was exponentially higher than it's been in the past. And I think that's a trend that's going to continue because with the way the portal is working, obviously teams are prioritizing that because if you can get a kid that's been proven on the college level for 2 years or someone coming out of high school that may need to still develop a year or two, you're going to go ahead and get that kid that can give you that instant impact right away 9 times out of 10. So unless you're a very highly rated kid, a high 4 or 5 star, I think you definitely want to be signing in that early signing period because if not, teams aren't going to wait for you. They're going to go fill your spot with someone in the portal that they can know they can lock in and have set to go for that season.
Yeah, and I think high school coaches are trying to get their kids to realize that you may be ranked whatever you think you're ranked, right, by the recruiting services, but the reality is, if a college player suddenly becomes available on the market, they could come in and take your spot, which makes all of this so tricky. And at some point, you're going to need some regulation here because, Andrew, as we've discussed here on this podcast, it really can become complicated. And I don't think coaches want to deal with this. It's kind of roster upheaval 12 months out of the year. But that's essentially what it's become. It's become NBA free agency. It's like the NBA summertime, but even wilder because there's so many more names on the list. And guys are ultimately looking to team up, put themselves in the best situation to make money and then also win. And it's kind of a complicated deal. But thank you for coming on and discuss anything else on your mind before we let you go here, Andrew.
Yes, one name that just popped into my head as we were talking about DBs. Sam McCall, the former FSU safety, was very highly rated coming out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think he was ever happy at FSU from the start. He signed very early in the day. I was told if he knew Travis Hunter was making that flip later after him, that he would not have signed with FSU. That was one of the main reasons he was going there.
Right.
So I think that's why we didn't see a lot of him his freshman year. I don't think he really wanted to be there from the start. But he is someone that I think Miami will be very heavily going after. Him and Cormani McLean were teammates at Lake Gibson. They are very, very close. They locked down that secondary together in high school for multiple years, and I think it's something that he's interested in teaming up with Cormani again in Miami. I think that'd be a big addition in the secondary for UM.
All right, you heard it from Andrew Ferrelli, our insider, part of Team Raw now, 7-on-7 here in South Florida, with Jose Duaso and a bunch of other guys. And I'm looking forward. You got to let me know when these Raw tryouts are happening or workouts or whatever it is, so I can go out there and see how it comes together. I'd like to just be around it and see how it comes together because you guys seem to have a much deeper vision for what's going to happen. It's not
Yeah,
just going out
definitely.
and playing in tournaments.
No, definitely not. But yeah, January 6th. If you want to come out there, it'll be at Little Haiti Soccer Park. that'll be where the showcases will be for that Friday night and Saturday. But yeah, definitely a vision to expand it far more than just some tournaments here and there.
All right. Well, Andrew, thanks for coming on. Look forward to talking to you here in the weeks ahead as Miami's roster begins to get taken shape. Make sure to follow Andrew. Want to share your Twitter account? Some people should have it already.
Yeah, it's just Andrew underscore Ferrelli, ANDREW underscore FERRELLI. Tweet some info, some cryptic stuff, and then just a lot of jokes about Florida and FSU always.
That's right. We need somebody to do that. I have to be impartial. I'm not allowed to join in on all that kind of stuff. But thanks again for coming on. And that's it for this week's Wide Right podcast. I will be all over the state here, hopefully stopping by IMG Academy as well in the coming days to talk to some Miami recruits. But a lot of action. Make sure you stay tapped into theathletic.com. Max Olson, who is our transfer portal writer, and I have been watching the portal quite a bit. A lot of Miami guys, a lot of Texas A&M guys in there. We will continue to update on our live blog all the changes as they go by. Make sure you follow my tweets, follow Andrew. It'll be a very busy time the next month. All right. Thank you so much.